I'm trying something a tiny little bit different this week. Every single case and story is going to come to you from New York. I like the idea of targeting a certain area so that I can deep dive on stories that are otherwise missed. There are 3 new cases for you in this video, as well as 1 bonus case from the Dark Case Archive at the end. Love ya. On the night of April 15, 2023, 20-year-old Kaylin Gillis was traveling through rural Washington County, New York, with friends. They were trying to find another friend's house near Hebron, a small town of dark roads, scattered properties, and unreliable mobile reception. Kaylin was in the front passenger seat of a Ford Explorer, driven by her boyfriend, Blake Walsh. Jacob Haynes and Alexandra Whiting sat behind them. They were part of a larger group traveling in 2 vehicles and on a motorcycle, following directions through an area where one long driveway could easily resemble another. At approximately 9:45 p.m., the group turned onto a steep driveway, leading to a house owned by 65-year-old Kevin Monahan. The property sat above Patterson Hill Road on a rural ridgetop. Within moments, they realized their mistake. Nobody stepped out. Nobody approached the house. They simply began turning around and backing away. Inside, Monahan heard the vehicles and motorcycle. He later claimed that he believed he and his wife were under siege. He told her to hide in a closet, loaded a 20-gauge pump-action shotgun, and walked outside. The young people were already leaving when the first deafening blast was heard. Monahan fired once as the vehicles moved away. He later described it as a warning shot, intended to begin a dialogue, although the people in the driveway had not confronted him or tried to enter the house. Then he fired again. The second round tore into the Ford Explorer and struck Kaylin in the neck. Blake accelerated away as the others tried to understand what had happened. They attempted to call 911, but the weak signal in the area prevented the call from connecting. The group continued towards the neighboring town of Salem. Kaylin's friends were trapped inside the vehicle with her, searching for reception while every lost minute reduced the chance that help would actually arrive in time. Around 5 miles from the house, the emergency call finally connected. First responders reached them on Cemetery Road and began CPR, but Kaylin's time on this earth had already ended. She had graduated from Schuylerville High School in 2021, where she was an honor student and a flyer on the cheerleading team. Her family described her as a talented artist, animal lover, and devoted friend who hoped to study in Florida and become a marine biologist or veterinarian. While emergency workers attended to Kaylin, officers traveled to Monahan's home. He would not come down the driveway. For roughly an hour, he remained inside, speaking with a dispatcher and his attorney while police ordered him to surrender. Monahan initially claimed he had been in bed since 8:30. He suggested that hunters might have fired the shots. Officers saw him pacing inside the brightly lit house, but he continued refusing to approach them. A specialist police team eventually drove up the driveway in an armored vehicle and took him into custody. The question was not whether Monahan had fired the shotgun. The dispute became why he fired it, and whether the second shot had been intentional. At trial, Monahan said the vehicles made him fear an invasion. He claimed that after firing into the air, he began lowering the weapon as the group left. According to his account, he was wearing flip-flops when he stumbled over loose nails on his deck. The shotgun struck the decking and discharged accidentally. But when shown a photograph of the deck, Monahan could not identify the nails that had supposedly caused him to fall. The prosecution also presented evidence that he had attempted to conceal what happened and repeatedly provided false accounts after the shooting. The jurors had to decide whether this was a terrible accident or an act showing complete indifference to the lives inside the departing vehicle. On January 23, 2024, after approximately 2 hours of deliberation, they found Monahan guilty of second-degree murder, reckless endangerment, and tampering with physical evidence. At sentencing, Monahan declined to address the court. Judge Adam Michelini said he had shown no meaningful responsibility and appeared to believe he had been justified. The judge recalled that Monahan had joked when he took the witness stand and spoke about completing work on his house and returning to racing his dirt bike. Those comments stood in sharp contrast to the future taken from Kaylin and the lives permanently changed inside the vehicle. Kaylin's father, Andrew Gillis, described his daughter as the pride and joy of their family. Blake told Monahan that everyone knew the shooting had not been an accident. Alexandra described living with constant fear since watching her best friend struck beside her. On March 1st, 2024, Monahan received 25 years to life for second-degree murder, followed by an additional term of up to 4 years for tampering with evidence.
In killing Kalin Gillis, you took away a friend, you took away a girlfriend, you took away a daughter, a granddaughter, and a sibling. You took away so much unrealized potential. Her potential to enrich other people's lives and to contribute to our society. You also traumatized the young men and women who mistakenly drove up your driveway that night. You will scar them. This will scar them and traumatize them for the rest of their lives.
The time it takes to turn a car in the road is how long it took Monahan to make his decision. That is how much thought went into ending Kaylin's time on this earth. On the night of January 26, 2005, Nicole DuFresne appeared to be moving closer to the life she had traveled to New York to build. The 28-year-old actress and playwright had just started working as a bartender at Rockwood Music Hall on Manhattan's Lower East Side. It was the venue's opening night, and her fiancé, Jeffrey Sparks, joined Nicole's close friend Mary Jane Gibson and Mary Jane's boyfriend, Scott Nath, to celebrate. Nicole had studied theatre at Emerson College, acted in small productions, and co-written a play with Mary Jane that toured fringe festivals in the United States and Canada. She and Jeffrey had moved to New York 2 years earlier. They were planning to marry that October, while Nicole continued writing and performing. After Nicole finished her shift, the four friends went to Max Fish on Ludlow Street. They drank, played pinball, and stayed into the early morning. When they finally left shortly before 3 a.m., they walked through the Lower East Side, laughing and pushing one another into the snowbanks. Several blocks away, 7 young people had left an apartment in the Baruch houses, looking for trouble. The group included 19-year-old Rudy Fleming, his girlfriend Ashley Evans, and 5 friends and relatives, some only teenagers. Fleming was carrying a .357 Magnum revolver. Earlier that night, they had targeted security guard Adam Chavez because Fleming wanted his white leather jacket. Chavez was struck and chased but escaped into the road. The group then traveled to Brooklyn, where they tried to provoke more confrontations before returning to Manhattan. At approximately 3 a.m., the 7 reached Clinton Street, just as Nicole and her friends walked past. Their laughter caught Evans' attention. She later explained that the 4 seemed extremely happy, and that their happiness made her angry. She identified them as the people the group should confront. Fleming stepped into their path, displayed the revolver, and demanded money. Jeffrey initially did not understand what was happening. He tried to push past, and Fleming struck him across the left side of his face with the weapon. The impact opened an injury near Jeffrey's eye and left him dazed. Another robber, Savizio Simmons, said, "It doesn't have to be like this. My friend's bugging. We just want the money." Nicole immediately moved towards Jeffrey and asked whether he was all right. Jeffrey told everyone they should leave and began moving north with Scott. Mary Jane's handbag and telephone were taken and passed to the 2 girls in the group. Jeffrey believed Nicole was following him. She was not. Nicole remained close to the attackers, focused on what had happened to the people she loved. She confronted Fleming and demanded to know whether he intended to fire the weapon. Fleming pushed her backwards. Nicole regained her balance and repeated the question. She said, "What are you going to do? Are you going to shoot us? Is that what you wanted?" The distance between them had narrowed to only a few feet. Fleming raised the revolver. A single deafening blast broke across Clinton Street, and Nicole was struck in the chest. Scott and Jeffrey turned and ran back. Nicole had fallen onto her back in the street. Jeffrey knelt beside her and held her as Mary Jane and Scott gathered around them. Nicole remained conscious for at least part of those final moments, but the injury had reached her heart. Her time on this earth ended shortly afterwards at Beth Israel Medical Center. The seven fled, but surveillance footage and witness information quickly led police straight to them. The revolver was recovered beneath a bed in the apartment, where several members of the group had been staying. Accounts from Fleming's companions directly rejected the suggestion that the weapon had discharged accidentally. Yet public discussion soon centered on Nicole's words, rather than Fleming's decision. Newspapers, television programs, and crime prevention organizations questioned whether she had made a fatal mistake by deciding to confront rather than leave. Some coverage reduced her final moments to a warning about how victims should behave during a robbery. Jeffrey rejected that interpretation. Nicole had not been daring Fleming to use the weapon. In his view, she was trying to make him recognize the absurdity of what he was doing and give everyone a chance to walk away. Her family also defended her, arguing that she had acted instinctively after her fiancé was injured and her closest friend was robbed. In October 2006, Fleming was convicted of first-degree murder, robbery and attempted robbery, and unlawful possession of a weapon. He had already been on parole after previously pointing a firearm at a truancy officer. 2 months later, he received life in prison, without the possibility of parole, followed by an additional 30 years for the other offences committed that night. Several accomplices received separate sentences or plea agreements. Evans, whose anger had directed the group towards the four laughing friends, was sentenced to 6 years for first-degree robbery. Nicole's family described their own punishment more simply. Fleming's sentence would be served inside prison. Theirs was life without Nicole. Just a quick one. For some reason, my videos are normally seen by just 1 to 2% of my subscribers. I actually don't know why. Regardless of the reasons, it's making it extremely challenging to keep this show on the road. And I promise I don't like to do this. It makes me feel like Oliver Twist or something. But please do consider becoming a channel member. There are currently 343 of you, and I'm aiming for the crazy goal of 1,000 by the end of 2026. You get things like early access to videos, our behind-the-scenes podcast, and of course my eternal gratitude. Thank you, and I love you all. Now, back to the video. In 2012, Kathleen Valle became concerned about the amount of time her husband was spending online. Gilberto Valle was a 6-year veteran of the New York City Police Department, assigned to Manhattan's 26th precinct. The couple had met through an online dating site, married in 2010, and recently had a daughter. But after the child was born, Kathleen noticed a change. Valle became distant, remained on the computer until the early morning, and began asking unusual questions about her routine. When she discovered that he had been visiting extreme adult interest websites, she installed monitoring software on their shared computer. What appeared on the screen was far beyond anything she had expected. Kathleen found thousands of messages, photographs of herself, and images of women they both knew. In conversations with users of one dark website, Valle discussed capturing, seriously violating, harming, and consuming people. Some messages placed Kathleen herself at the center of these scenarios. She fled the apartment with their daughter, traveled to Nevada, and handed the computer to authorities. Investigators discovered that Valle had discussed more than 100 women across dozens of conversations. Some were strangers, but others were former classmates, friends and acquaintances, whose real names and photographs he had used. He researched methods of restraining people and accessed a police database to locate information connected to at least one woman. The discovery created an immediate question. Were these messages evidence of a genuine plan, or were they elaborate fantasies shared between anonymous users? Prosecutors believed Valle had crossed the line. They argued that using real women, personal information and police resources showed movement from imagination into preparation. He was arrested in October 2012, dismissed from the NYPD, and charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping and unlawfully accessing a law enforcement database. Valle's defense accepted that the conversations were disturbing. However, his lawyers argued that he never intended to act on them. In most of his exchanges, Valle described the discussions as imaginary. No woman had been abducted or physically harmed, and many supposed plans contained impossible details, conflicting dates or arrangements that were never followed. A jury found him guilty in March 2013. The conspiracy conviction exposed him to the possibility of life in prison. Valle remained incarcerated for 21 months, including 7 months in solitary confinement. Then, in June 2014, the judge who had overseen the trial overturned the most serious conviction. Once the exaggerations and invented details were removed, the judge concluded that the evidence demonstrated deeply alarming online roleplay, but not proof beyond a reasonable doubt of a genuine agreement to kidnap someone. Valle was released and sentenced to time already served on the remaining computer charge. In December 2015, an appeals court went further. It upheld the conspiracy acquittal and overturned the database conviction as well. Valle had lost his career, marriage, and almost 2 years of freedom, but his connection to the case did not end there. He later published a memoir titled Raw Deal, the untold story of NYPD's Cannibal Cop. He then released the horror novel A Gathering of Evil, which followed a group of sadists who captured 2 young New Yorkers. Valle described it as extremely graphic but entirely fictional, explaining that writing offered him a possible way to earn a living after losing his position with the police. I think this case raises some interesting issues. In a way, it sounds obvious that someone should be punished for allegedly making plans and researching victims. But then, if it was never acted on, are we just talking about thought police territory? Please do share your thoughts in the comments.
I'm going to Barnard. It's in New York City, across the street from Columbia. It's an all-girls school. I'm really excited about that.
As human beings, we seem to live in one of 2 different worlds. Some people live in a world where love is the ruling power. They want to help to make it a better place, spreading nothing but good vibes when and where they can. However, others, either by choice or by circumstance, live in a kind of shadow world. They will hurt, they will take, they will destroy, all without a second thought or inkling of remorse, doing all they can to wriggle free from the nets of consequence. What do you think happens when these 2 worlds collide? This is the truly infuriating case of Tessa Majors. Located in Manhattan, New York, Barnard College is every bit as prestigious as Columbia University, its next-door neighbor. The all-female college has educated some high-profile names over the years. These include Joan Rivers, Martha Stewart, and Cynthia Nixon. But arguably the most important name to ever grace its halls is Tessa Majors. Tessa Rain Majors was born May the 11th, 2001, hailing from Charlottesville, Virginia. Her father, Inhumane Majors, described her as loving many things, but mostly she loved people. He went on to explain, Tessa expected everyone to just get along. And it was true. What made Tessa Majors so remarkable was her loving, caring personality. But her accomplishments during her 18 years were every bit as noteworthy. During high school, Tessa had been part of the cross-country squad at St. Anne's Belfield High School. She was the head of the creative writing club at the school, and she found time to volunteer for political campaigns and at the local animal shelter. She was, as one friend put it, super smart. At 15, she read From Beirut to Jerusalem for her own satisfaction on a family vacation, and she found a hobby in cataloguing all the indigenous types of wildflowers in Virginia. This is just incredibly wholesome stuff. During the spring of 2019, Tessa had interned at the Augusta Free Press newspaper. Tessa Majors would conquer the world, said editor Chris Graham of the strong but delicate teen. Friends described her as bold, challenging and fearless, disarmingly direct and intimidatingly confident. Upon her graduation from high school in Virginia, Tessa had given a speech to the juniors at the school. "Expect the best from others," she told them. "It's okay to be disappointed when people aren't kind." So it was not a surprise when a young woman was accepted to Barnard College. Like everything else, Tessa was ready to conquer the famed educational establishment. Moving to New York City to attend the prestigious college and study journalism, Tessa was also bass player and songwriter for a band named Patient Zero. They had recently released their first album. Even with the renowned Columbia University looming over the grounds, Tessa Majors would be a force to be reckoned with. Less than a mile away from the university is the border of Harlem, New York City. Harlem has long held a reputation for being a dangerous neighborhood, even in spite of its recent transformation by developers and gentrification. Smack dab in the middle is Morningside Park, a veritable no-man's land, creating the perfect juxtaposition of class and culture. Despite its affable name, Morningside Park is 30 acres of overgrown weeds and rocky outcroppings, all with a sprinkling of discarded syringes and other trash. Belonging to the city of New York, the inauspicious frontier of lawlessness receives approximately $30,000 per year. This is made up from charitable donations to help maintain the grounds. Central Park, by comparison, received $5 million. And whilst Harlem has experienced a wave of gentrification over the last decade and a half, the stigma of public housing tenements remains. The contrast to the symbols of high society represented by Columbia University and Barnard College less than a mile to the west is ever present. "I want to tell you," Taylor Murphy, an officer at Manhattan Family Court, said to one reporter, "that was our worst fear, that someone from up the hill would come down the hill and one of the students would be killed." Through all the gentrification of Harlem and a community-driven effort to clean up Morningside Park, little by little, undergraduates attending the prominent colleges felt more comfortable to travel through the grounds, even late into the evening. While Barnard College used to issue warnings to its all-female student body not to travel the streets of Harlem and more specifically the paths of the park, by 2019 the warnings were far less ominous. The criminality and turmoil that New York City was known for was but a dark stain on the city's past. With the number of homicides per annum now below 300, New York was rated as the safest major metropolis in the entire country. So at around 8:30 p.m. on December the 11th, when students of Barnard College received a text message advising them to avoid Morningside Park as police investigated a robbery, it came as a relative surprise. But for the community on the other side of the park, it was reminiscent of the not-so-distant past. And for 18-year-old Tessa Majors, it was evidence that perhaps the world could not be expected to be as kind as she was. On December the 11th, 2019, as Tessa Majors walked down the steps from Barnard College into Morningside Park, and three ominous, shadowy figures approached her, perhaps she simply expected the best from them like anyone else who crossed her path. Sadly though, she received anything but. As Tessa walked into the park, three teenage boys, one 13 years of age, the other two 14, approached her and demanded her cell phone and money. Tessa refused. One of the older boys restrained her while the others struggled to take her belongings. "Help me, I'm being robbed," Tessa screamed. And ever the fighter, she bit one of the teen's fingers as hard as she could, hard enough to draw blood. Within seconds, the boy had produced a sharp implement and plunged it into Tessa's chest repeatedly. The struggle ended as feathers burst from the punctures in her down jacket. The two oldest boys rifled through her pockets and then ran off, hoping to evade the consequences of their actions. As her attackers bolted from the scene, Tessa struggled to climb the steps that are carved into the hill. The stairway was constructed in several tiers, but at that moment it must have seemed mountainous to the scared and injured Tessa. She did, however, fight her way to the top, leaving a trail of vital fluids running down the steps behind her. It was there that a Columbia University public safety officer saw her collapse onto the pavement. The guard hurried over to Tessa and called 911. The police and ambulance arrived just moments later, but it was simply too late. Just a few hours later, the bright flame that was Tessa Majors was extinguished at Mount Sinai Morningside Hospital.
Just after nightfall, 18-year-old Tessa Majors staggered up these park stairs, fighting for her life, police say, after she was robbed and repeatedly stabbed, her wounds fatal.
This is a despicable crime.
Tonight, New York's mayor vowing to find her killers.
There's a high level of confidence that these perpetrators will be arrested and will be prosecuted.
In a statement, Majors' family called her a light that shined brightly, adding, "Our hearts will never be the same." Barnard's president saying this is an unthinkable tragedy that's shaken us to our core.
To realize, dear God, that could have been literally any of us.
At the park, just blocks from campus, that police say has one of the highest number of robberies in the city, students are horrified.
I know in the evening we should not enter the park.
Sean Bai lives right across the street from the park.
I think this is a huge wake-up call for all of us.
The next day, December the 12th, 2019, police in the area made note of a person who was wearing clothes that matched the description given to investigators of one of Tessa Majors' attackers. Under the pretense of trespassing, 13-year-old Zaire Davis was taken into custody. With Davis' legal guardian present, detectives interrogated the boy. Little by little, the boy slowly admitted to police what had happened the night before in Morningside Park. Davis and two friends, Luciano Lewis and Rashawn Weaver, both a year older than him, had gone to the park after dinner. It was true, their intentions were to rob people. After several people passed by, along came Tessa Majors, small and innocent in appearance. An easy target, thought the boys. Though they had planned to commit the robbery, the knife had not been part of the plan, Davis told the detectives. Earlier in the evening, Weaver had dropped the sharp implement, and unknowingly, Davis had picked it up and returned it to him, he admitted. Lewis and Weaver approached Tessa Majors while Davis stayed back. He would go on to tell investigators that he did not know they were going to rob her. Until, that is, Lewis grabbed Tessa in a headlock to restrain her, and Weaver attempted to take her belongings. In fact, he also did not know that Weaver had jabbed Tessa until he saw feathers falling from her coat. After this first interrogation, Zaire Davis was taken into custody where he would remain until his trial. As he was 13 years old at the time of the crime, he was charged in family court instead of criminal court as per New York state law. Eventually, he pled guilty to robbery and received an 18-month sentence with credit for time served leading up to the trial. The following day, December the 13th, 2019, Luciano Lewis was arrested and questioned by police, but eventually he was released later that day. However, police could not find Rashawn Weaver, the alleged main attacker. Relatives told police that they had been driving Weaver to the precinct to surrender when he bolted from the car. 2 weeks later, on December the 26th, 2019, police arrested Rashawn Weaver in the presence of his mother. It was believed that he had been aided in hiding by several family members until the bite mark on his finger from Tessa Majors had healed. But due to lack of evidence, he too was released from custody. Frustrated with only the testimony of Zaire Davis to go on, police dove back into the investigation, searching for any evidence to bring Tessa Majors' attackers to justice. In the meantime, Sergeants Benevolent Association President Ed Mullins told press that Tessa had been in the park to buy an illicit substance. This prompted outrage from not only her family, but even such prominent figures as New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, who tweeted, "We do not shame victims in this city." Strangely enough, the controversy surrounding the case was far from over. On December the 20th, police arrested Trevor Spring of Mystic, Connecticut. Spring had posted to Reddit a tirade chock full of spelling mistakes. He indicated that he was going to travel to New York City and, in his own way, take care of the suspects in Tessa Majors' case who had been questioned and released, and that their parents would be next. An NYPD extremism unit spotted the post and reported it to authorities in Connecticut. Spring was charged with a misdemeanor threatening charge and released on $5,000 bail. While the charge carries a maximum prison term of 1 year, authorities determined that Spring had no weapons at his disposal. He claimed that he had no intentions of going to New York City to hurt anyone, but that he was just simply enraged. However, this narrative concerning Spring and his comments did nothing to help the racially motivated overtones of this case. As one Harlem mother put it, this angelic little white girl stuff has to stop. Worried that police would return to policies such as stop and frisk due to this case. Then in January 2020, investigators announced that they felt they had sufficient evidence to take the case against Rashawn Weaver and Luciano Lewis before a grand jury. On Valentine's Day 2020, a grand jury indicted both Rashawn Weaver and Luciano Lewis on charges of second-degree murder and first-degree robbery. Prosecutors played surveillance footage from the park, as well as footage showing Rashawn Weaver wearing the same jacket in another robbery just nights before. The same jacket he was described as wearing during the ending of Tessa Majors. They also played an audio recording of a recorded phone conversation that Weaver had with his father, who was incarcerated. During the call, the boy admitted to his father that he had jabbed Tessa Majors because she bit him. But perhaps most importantly, investigators found DNA matching that of Rashawn Weaver beneath Tessa's fingernails. According to police, this indicated that she had fought like hell. Both of the boys were arraigned on February the 19th, 2020 and taken into custody to await trial. On September the 21st, 2021, Luciano Lewis pled guilty to charges of second-degree murder and first-degree robbery. He agreed to testify against Rashawn Weaver, even though he was not guaranteed any leniency during sentencing. For his part in the untimely demise of Tessa Majors, Lewis received a sentence of life in prison with the possibility of parole after 9 years. Months later, on December the 16th, 2021, 2 full years after he took the life of Tessa Majors, Rashawn Weaver pled guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree robbery. He admitted to the court that he had intentionally caused the end of Tessa Majors by jabbing her with a sharp implement. He did this because she had bitten him during the robbery. He also told the court that he would never be back in court again, and that he was sorry for causing the death of Tessa Majors, who deserved to have a long life. However, prosecutors noted that court officials refused to remove Weaver's handcuffs during the hearing because he had been charged in another case for attacking another inmate whilst in detention, and that he had also been responsible for attacking staff at a detention centre on 11 separate occasions. Weaver was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 14 years. The sentence was significantly less than the 21 years to life maximum the charges carry. This was due to Weaver pleading guilty in court. Thank you so much for watching. I'm uploading daily true crime and dark content here on this channel, so make sure that you're subscribed, hit like on the video, and also drop a comment so you get shown more of my stuff. Please do be careful out there, and I'll see you tomorrow.